Right. I just came out of, in the last 24 hours, I've been with your youth for 5.5 of those. It's nice to not be the oldest person in the room finally. Some of you didn't laugh like you should have. In the book of Romans, chapter 11, Elohim compares his family to an olive tree. He tells us in this chapter that branches were broken off so that we could be grafted in. Now, read that chapter sometime on your own and understand that the branches were not broken off so that because we were just so wonderful. Because, of course, we would never bring dysfunction to the tree. We would never bring arguments, dissension, all of those things to the tree. We would make the tree perfect, right? Right. Branches were broken off so that you and I could be grafted in. It is only because of his goodness, because of his grace, because of his mercy, because he desired to have a larger tree that would include you and I, that he broke branches off. So today we are here as part of an olive tree. But I would like to submit to you that our attitude toward the branches, the broken off branches, has been wrong. We need to work on our attitude toward the branches that were broken off, because according to Romans 11, chapter 24, for if you were cut out of what is by nature a wild olive tree and grafted, contrary to nature, into a cultivated olive tree, how much more will these branches be grafted back into their own olive tree? There is a day that branches that were cut off will be grafted back in. I would just as soon have a good attitude today toward the branch I may be living next to. I would just as soon not have to explain to the branch that's been grafted in next to me why I was so arrogant toward the branch that had been broken off so that I could have a place. Brad Scott has been mentioned many times. The reason Brad has been mentioned many times is because we enjoyed fruit of Brad, but we ingested his fruit and it's produced seed that is now producing more fruit. That's the principle. And Brad would teach us about a wild olive branch. Now, some of us have taken that verse a little to the extreme, kind of the same as you're to be a peculiar people. Some have taken that a little over the top. You think so, Eddie? Yeah. So, I want to talk to you about being not in a wild olive branch, but a responsible branch. It was Sunday morning, May 17th, 1998. I was standing in the pulpit, or as Barry Phillips would say from Grassy Creek, the pulpit. I was standing in the pulpit and I had my ticket to go to Israel for the first time. I stood in front of a group of people in a Southern Baptist Charismatic Pentecostal with Messianic Zionist leanings church in a crabbing community in North Florida on the Panhandle, what they called the Big Bend. We referred to it as the armpit. I would be leaving in a few days for a pastor's fam trip We would be on the ground for about 5 days. We would see most of the land and receive a t-shirt at the end that said, "I ran where Yeshua walked." No, we didn't get the t-shirt, but I ran where he walked, even though I didn't even know his name was Yeshua at the time. But I stood there in that church that morning, and I said to them, there are two things I'd like you to pray for your pastor. Number one is that I would be able to walk the ground and feel the soil that Yeshua, my Messiah, I would have used the word Jesus. I want to feel the ground that he walked on. And number two, I want to feel the heartbeat of my Jewish brothers and sisters. Now that sounds very wonderful until you understand that I grew up Southern Baptist in the South. I cannot remember a single message regarding Jews being relevant to my life in Jacksonville, Florida. When I came to Messiah, I was part of denominations that were teaching replacement theology. And I stood there and said, I want to feel the heartbeat of my Jewish brothers and sisters. And I had probably been teaching replacement theology the week before. And the week before that, the pre-tribulation rapture, where I'm going to go to the heavens so that God can beat up on the Jews for being so bad. See the irony of this? I would go to Israel. I would weep when I saw the Sea of Galilee, which is not a sea, it's a lake. I would look at the Jordan River and think that's a creek where I come from. But I would weep through the land. The land would connect with me in a way that I cannot explain to you today. The hardest thing about this pandemic, whatever you want to call it, that we have been through is my lungs have not been able to breathe the air of Israel. I long for the air. I long to be in the land again. I truly feel like a fish out of water because there's something that is me in Israel that for 2 years I have not been able to visit. I long to be home again, which is what I talked about last year. It was on the last night. It was men and women, it was a pastor's trip, ministry. And the last night, they said, we have something set up at a congregation. It was a Messianic congregation in the old city of Jerusalem, and we're going to go, and they've asked us to come and to teach a song in English. It was 7 different nations that were gathering together. And so, who wants to go? There was about 15 of us. All of the men had excuses, as most men do. Yeah, that hurt. Oh, I got to go call my wife. Well, I love my wife, but it's only going to be another 24 hours. I'm in Israel. Well, I got to pack. What do you got to pack? It's all dirty. Just throw it in there, All the ladies said, we're going. Well, I know one thing. Ladies understand what's important. And I got a great amen from women right there. I should have. Okay. That was your chance. Women understand what's important. Amen. Yeah, there you go. Listen up better for next time. So I got in a van with all these ladies, and we're going over there, and Karen, our tour leader, said, hey, we've been asked to teach them a song. Mike, what song are we going to sing? Well, anybody that knows me knows I can't sing. I mean, I really can't. Even my wife said so. But so, I came up with something. And we got there, and I said, they said, okay, here we go up on the platform, and we do this song. It's just incredible to think back over it. And then after that, one of the pastors of this congregation said, well, we want one of you to address us, and speak for a moment. And all the ladies looked at me and said, Mike, you're on. It's like, really? So I go out there, I step out there, I've got a microphone, and I just started sharing about my experience in the land over those days. And I looked at the pastors and I said, you guys, what you deal with here in restoring the land and holding the land, I don't understand it, but I respect you so much. And to me, you guys are my heroes here. And if I had water, I would wash your feet. Watch what you say. Because somehow 30 seconds had not passed. I mean, really, 30 seconds, and a woman's coming by through the back door, actually the front door. She's coming through that door with, you remember those old tubs, those old pink tubs that we used to wash the babies in? She's coming through. Where did she find one of those in Jerusalem? And how'd she get the water in it that quick? She comes walking through that door with this tub of water and a bar of soap and a towel. Walks up in front of me and looks at me in the eye and said, "Were you serious?" Started quoting Calgon commercials, Calgon, take me away. Made a good time for the rapture, I said, yeah. Truth is, I'd never washed anybody's feet in my life, now that I think about it. So I walked over to this pastor, and I started washing his feet, and then the other one, and I looked in his eyes. The second man, I looked in his eyes, and when I did, I saw the heartbeat of my Jewish brother. And my life has never been the same since. I left that place, came back to the church. The last night in Jerusalem, our tour leader, Karen Goodman, used to be the deaf interpreter at Brownsville Revival in Pensacola, handed me her card. That's it right there. Still carry it. And on the back it said, our responsibilities to Israel. So I came back to that church on May 31st of 1998, and I stood up before them with notes in hand. These are the exact notes that I had in 1998. And I taught them 4 responsibilities that you and I, as grafted in branches, have toward Israel and the Jewish people. And I'd like to share them with you today. Number 1, Psalm 122, verse 6. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May those that love you prosper. Anybody ever part of the prosperity gospel? Name it and claim it. Blab it and grab it. You ever hear that one? How do you prosper? Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. So I stood up in front of this group of people in a crabbing community in North Florida, and I said, we're going to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And some of them are probably watching, and they know that this is really ironic and funny, but most of them could not have found Jerusalem on a map with a pointer. If it was circled, we were kind of small. We were like the smallest church in the whole county. And people would say, can anything good come out of Spring Creek, Florida? So here we are, and I said, we're going to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And they're like, yeah, let's do it. How do we do it? I said, I don't know. I mean, how do you pray? You ever wonder that? How do you pray for the peace of Jerusalem? Are we like praying for the politics, for this leader or that one, and now it's changed? So do I pray for that guy because they're calling him a left wing, but he's probably like right wing, but I really don't understand politics. And how do you have 120 parties to begin with? So, am I praying for, this is probably going to offend someone, and I've never done that in my life. I want to always pray that America always stands with Israel. Ladies and gentlemen, the scripture says that one day all nations shall come against Israel. And on that day, I want to be standing with Israel. Not the political party of Israel, but the kingdom of Israel. Do I pray for wisdom for the leaders of Israel? Yes, when 4,000 rockets are coming out of Gaza. When a prime minister gave away Gaza, and the fruit of is what? I pray because during the Intifada, a bomb went off on Ben Yehuda Street, killed numerous Jews. One year when I was there, I picked this up. It's a nut that was part of one of the bombs. When I picked it up on Ben Yehuda Street, it had blood on it. It had gone through a Jewish brother or sister of mine. How do I pray? What do I pray for? Shalom Yerushalayim. Eddie would tell us, Bill would tell us, others, that if we look at the Hebrew, the word shalom is not just peace. It means may that which is producing chaos be destroyed. May that which is producing chaos in Jerusalem be destroyed. The spirits, principalities, and there's only one way for that to happen. Bo Yeshua. So I'm praying for the peace of Jerusalem. How do I do that? Come quickly, Adonai, Yeshua. That, ladies and gentlemen, is how I pray for the peace of Jerusalem. That the Prince of Peace will return to the city of peace, be seated in a literal throne, in a literal temple, in a literal city, in a literal land. The land that the scripture calls my home, because I've been grafted in. Everybody in the church said, yeah, Pastor, we're going to do that. Let's pray. We'll pray for the peace of Jerusalem. I said, okay, number 2, Genesis chapter 12. I will bless those that bless you. I will curse those that curse you. I said, we're going to love and bless the Jewish people. They're going, yeah, let's do it. I said, does anybody in the church know a Jew? I live in a crabbing community. All right, that doesn't mean everybody's in a bad mood. They're catching crabs. All right, you don't have a lot of Jews coming to Spring Creek to buy crabs, and those that do probably don't really care about some things. So we're going to love and bless the Jewish people if we ever meet one. Yeah. So, yeah, Pastor, let's do it. We make a decision. So the next week, I go up to Tallahassee to the Christian bookstore. I walk in the door to buy some books about Israel, which is sometimes hard to do in a Christian bookstore. But I found a few, and I walked up to the counter. There was 4 counters around a round thing there, and there was one open. So I walked up to that counter, and behind the counter is this lady standing there, and she said, did you find everything that you need? Yes, I did. Thank you very much. And so I put everything down on the counter, and she looked down, and I had a ring on it, on my finger, and we've come a long ways, baby. I had bought a ring that had a Mogan David with a cross in it. Not really the 2 symbols have some difficulty in interaction, okay? So I've got this ring on my finger, and the lady behind the counter says, that's a beautiful ring. I said, thank you, I just bought it, I was in Jerusalem. She said, you were just in Jerusalem? I said, yes. You bought that ring? Yes. And I noticed that she had tears rolling down her cheeks. She said, I'm Jewish. Some of you may know her today. Her name is Michelle Paskey. Michelle and our family became very good friends. We helped start a Messianic congregation in Tallahassee. And all of a sudden, everywhere we look, there's Jews. There's like, wow, where'd these people all come from? And I'd have people come to our church and speak about Israel and all these things, and we just love on them, and we bless, and we take up an offering. We had 50 people in the room, and none of us could raise a dime with a lift jack. And the offering be $1,200, $1,800. I'd look at Randy, and he was my treasurer, and he'd say, Pastor, the offering's like $1,200. And I said, he says, I don't know where it came from. I said, don't count it again. Okay. So we had all this start, and then somewhere along the way, it became 3 o'clock in Franklin, Tennessee. And I got a few alarms going off because something that I do and have done for many years, some of you go back to the days of Alan and Roberta Stanfield, Yaakov and Valerie Rice, who taught me this, that at 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock, no matter what I'm doing, I stop, I stand, I turn toward Jerusalem and recite the Shema. And I'd like you to do that with me right now. In fact, it's interesting that you guys have been looking toward Jerusalem the whole time. It's just that way. Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kevot Malkuto, Leolam Vayed. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Blessed be his name, his glorious kingdom, both now and forever. Shalom Yerushalayim, may your kingdom come soon and in my day. Amen. And I invite you to join me in that. Thank you. You can be seated. I invite you to get your phone out, set your alarm to 9 o'clock, 3 o'clock. We have a Facebook site that is Shema Israel. You can come and join that. Right now, as we did that, there was hundreds of people in this time zone, hundreds of people in this time zone that joined us. And in 1 hour, it will be in the next time zone. As far as I know, we are around every single time zone right now with people saying the Shema. I know that Judaism has been doing that for centuries. It's taken us a little while to catch up. But let's catch up well. So love and bless the Jewish people. Yeah, Pastor, we got it. We're going to do it. Next. And I can give you scriptures on this. I don't have time. I've got limited time today. Aid in the restoration of Israel. Well, we weren't really Israel connected in that day. We're going to aid in the restoration of Israel. And this is a foreign concept to many people. It's like, well, what have I got to do with Israel? I know, as Eddie would teach us, I was one of the most interesting things in my life. He knows what's coming. I was Eddie's roommate. Don't ever pray for that. Talk about a fire hose. I was in need of medication at the end of that. Eddie, I said to him, what about and this was years ago. I said, Eddie, about this greater exodus, you think we're really going to Israel? Yep. You notice that Eddie can say more with one word than most of us can with paragraphs? He's like, yep. Okay. So you think we're going to go to Israel? Yep. Eddie, have you noticed? Eddie, have you looked at a map lately? Yep. Did you notice a little body of water there? Yep. How you think we're going to get there? Walk. So I've just had my end time theology kind of messed up because I'm now having to change the song that I can't sing from I'll fly away to I'll walk away, oh glory. I said, how do you think we're going to get across that? He said, well, he parted the Red Sea, didn't he? And I said, yep. But see, Messiah is coming to he's going to be Rico Cortez, I think, teaches a little bit about this, that there's going to be a temple. And the Messiah is going to be seated in a temple. Well, those Jews over there, they're doing that temple thing, and I just don't agree with them. So, you know, have you ever noticed that it's easier to drive a car that's moving? You ever notice it's easier to turn a car that's moving? So let's say that our Jewish brothers and sisters at the Temple Institute, they're in the car and they're moving. Can't the Father just say, you know, you need to turn just a little bit here? You need to turn just a little bit there? And so you're going to point out the faults of somebody that's doing something when you're not doing anything? I try to be nice. Katie, I try. Not hard sometimes, but I try. See, let's don't point our fingers at somebody that may be doing something that may need some guidance and judge them when we're not doing anything. I got one amen. Find ways to help. And by the way, if they have a commercial on at midnight on television, that's probably not the best place to give. Just saying. If they're all over Facebook with advertisements, that may not be the best place to give. You want to give to Israel? Talk to Eddie Chumney. Talk to Rico. Talk to Bill. Talk to me. Talk to others. I can get money from here to there. Let's be laying up our treasures on the way. We said, yeah, we'll aid we'll aid. Yes, we'll do it. Whatever. I didn't know that years later I'd be going to Israel and spending a few weeks there. I told this story last year, that one of the verses. In 1998, the verse that was here on that card is out of Isaiah 61, the stranger shall be your plowmen and your vine dressers, and the son of the foreigner will aid in the pruning of the vines. Kind of a not exact translation there. But in 2012, I got on a plane with my son Daniel, my Renna's son Zach, good friend of Daniel's. We went to Israel. We worked with Hayavel. Hard work. But I went to Lowe's or Home Depot or whatever. They said, we got pruners, don't worry. I said, no. No, I'm not using used pruners for this. So I went to the store and I bought the best pruners I think I could find that I could afford. And I put those in my bag. And we flew to Israel. We got off a plane. We went to the Mount of Blessing. The next morning, they got us up early. We had burnt pancakes out of a sure stick pan, green hash browns. Guys were cooking. And they had never seen those food shows. We got off that plane, we went up there, and the next morning we got up, we went out there, and I handed a set of pruners to Daniel. I handed a set of pruners to Zach. And I watched the son of a foreigner prune a vine. You've never tasted a drop of wine so amazing. It's when you've gone to Israel. You've helped prune the vines. You've harvested the grapes. And you look at a bottle of Hebraic Reserve a bottle of Saigot Edom, a bottle of Torah, and it has the year on it that you were there. My wife was able to go with us. Aid in the physical restoration. Do something, folks. Do something. Do something to be a part of the land that we will one day call home. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Love and bless the Jewish people. I know it says all of the seed of Abraham. I know that. I'm talking about the branches on the ground. Aid in the restoration. And number 4 is maybe the most difficult and most abused verse. Provoke to jealousy. Provoke the natural branches to jealousy. The word there in my study, I believe, is translated wrong and should be zealousness. But let's just go with jealousy for a little while. We've provoked our Jewish brothers and sisters to a lot of things. Suspicion, anger. We can go a long ways with this one. And by the way, this is not a judgmental statement, it's just a statement of fact. In recent years, we haven't done a lot better. Things need to change. One of my best friends is Hanok Young, an observant Jew. He's my tour guide. He's also one of my closest friends in the world. And the story he tells me of how he is treated is atrocious. I was on a radio program, and I said, my brother Hanok Young. I'd been invited, I said this last year, but I'd been invited to a country, I won't tell you which country it was. I'd been invited to a country to go and spend about 2 weeks speaking in this country. And they heard me call Hanok Young an observant Jew, an Orthodox, observant, traditional Jew in Israel. I called him my brother. And because I would not go back on that statement, I would not retract that statement and not call him my brother, I was disinvited to a whole country by Messianics. How about provoke to zealousness? You know what I found out? In provoking my Jewish brothers and sisters to zealousness? What do you think, Jan? They provoked us a whole lot more. Because I've learned more from my Jewish brothers and sisters about this book. And by the way, if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be here. I don't think, not anti-Semitic, not this and not anti-church, okay, but I just have a funny feeling that, the Torah has been done away with is kind of what we grew up with, That was, so maybe we should consider that if it wasn't for the Jews, we would not have had a Torah to be restored to. I said the Torah to be restored to. People say the Torah is being restored. No, the Torah doesn't need to be restored. It's not broke. We are being restored to it. It's because of our Jewish brothers and sisters, the natural branches, that we have a Torah to be restored to. I stood in that church and I spoke those 4 things, not knowing that that message would be the end of my pastorate, not because they asked me to leave. No. Most amazing people I've ever been around in my life. Most caring, loving. They never asked me to leave. But from a little town in Spring Creek, Florida, I ended up resigning and going and teaching. And one of the things I said, I told the father, is wherever you'll allow me to go, I'll teach those 4 things. And he sent me to 19 countries. I've taught those 4 things right there in Nelson, New Zealand, in Japan, in Austria, all over the United States. So I give you today these 4 things of pray for the peace of Jerusalem, love and bless the Jewish people, aid in the restoration of the land of Israel, because it is one day our home, and try to provoke everybody to zealousness. When you're around your Jewish brothers and sisters that you might meet, be careful in how you try to do that, and understand that as you try to provoke them, they may end up provoking more in you. Just saying. The last day in Israel, we went to Yad Vashem. It is not a museum. Museums for art. It is the Shoah Memorial, the Holocaust Memorial. 6 million Jews, including 1.5 million children, lost their lives in Nazi Germany. By the way, the similarities of that day and this are getting very, very close. That's another subject. But I went there and we went through the old Yad Vashem. You remember that one, Eddie? I liked it a lot better. It had just a heart to it. We went through and we came out the back door, and they led us down to a walkway which is called the Walk of the Righteous Gentiles. The carob trees are planted on that walkway. We were taken to this one that at that time the tree was about 4.5, 5 feet tall. And at the base of it was a plaque that said Corrie ten Boom. Now, I had heard of Corrie ten Boom. My grandmother, probably one of the only movies that she went to see was The Hiding Place. I had studied Corrie's life. I was honored back in, I think, 2005 to go to Haarlem, Holland, and to stand in The Hiding Place. That's a moment in life you don't forget too easy. I stood there and they told me a story about the tree. Corrie and her family had saved over 600 Jews during the time of the Shoah. Interesting enough that the story doesn't begin there. It began 100 years earlier in Holland at I believe a Dutch Reformed church that Grandpa ten Boom had attended a service one evening that had been very spiritual, they said, in nature. And the evangelist pastor had talked about Israel and God's chosen people. So he came back home and he began to teach his family and anyone that would come from the neighborhood in the 1840s. 100 years prior to the Shoah, he began to teach his family and friends to pray for the peace of Jerusalem and to love and bless his Jewish brothers and sisters. Little did he know that 100 years later, his family would be called to give their lives, some of them, to save those very people he sought to bless. They were, if you've seen the movie, read the story, they were betrayed by a friend. When's the last time that happened? They were arrested. Papa ten Boom died. Corrie and Betsy ended up in a concentration camp. Betsy was not very well. She was sick. And to encourage her, Corrie would always say, Betsy, do not give up hope, because one day we will go from here. They were in Ravensbrück concentration camp. She said, do not give up hope. One day we will go and we will tell the world of the goodness of God in Ravensbrück concentration camp. After being molested, victimized, many things happening. Betsy died. And because of a clerical error, Corey was released from Ravensbrück just a few weeks later. And she would travel the world teaching of the goodness of God in Ravensbrück concentration camp. The other day, we were talking about this at my home. Daniel and Catesby, his wife, were there, and I went into my office, and somebody had given me pictures, Xerox copies of pictures of when the Israeli government brought Corey to Yad Vashem, and they planted a tree in her honor. If you know anything about the 9 steps of a biblical covenant, the last step is to plant a tree. Covenant. Corey planted that tree. She ended up having a stroke up in northern Arizona, working with Native American peoples. And a few weeks after, that tree had grown, but a few weeks after that tree, that Corey died, that tree died. Just died. I kind of think it was the Almighty's hand of maybe saying, Corey, and I spend a lot of time looking through a windshield, okay? So my mind kind of wanders at times. I kind of get this picture of Corey, of the Almighty saying, Corey, I know that Oscar got the big movie, but I'd like to do something special for you to show the world of my covenant that you entered into. And a few weeks after her death, that tree died. I was teaching that one day. I was in a conference with Rosemary Schindler, the niece by marriage of Oscar Schindler, and a lady named Susie Sondiger. I had never met either one of them. I told the story. And a little later, I was told that there was going to be this person that acted out the life of Corey. She was there in the congregation. I hadn't heard anything like this, so I'm sitting there, and they introduce this special guest, and all of a sudden, this lady gets up from her table, and I've seen her. I didn't recognize her. Nothing special there, but she gets up, and she's got this blue plaid dress and a black purse, gray hair, the black shoes, and she gets up and tells the story of a watchmaker's daughter in Holland, and the story of their family and how they gave their lives for God's chosen people. At the end, Susie and I talked, and she said, Mike, I need to tell you the rest of the story. She said, after that tree died, the government of Israel replanted a tree, but it wouldn't grow. Nothing they could do. The Israelis are pretty smart people. If you got drip irrigation, and a lot of other things, like a cell phone, comes from there. Okay? They could not get the tree to grow. Susie said, I heard the story of Corey, and I thought, somebody needs to go out and tell that story. But I can't act, and I can't talk good, and I'm not good in front of people. Yeah, Moses. So, of course, the father would tag her to do it, So she took some acting courses, and come to find out she's the same height as Corey, the same build as Corey. She got the accent down, and she'd go to synagogues and to churches and wherever she was asked to go, and she would tell the story of the Ten Boom family in Holland. And she said, Mike, when I started going out and teaching, the tree started growing. I can attest to you, being there a few years ago, the tree's growing. And it grows as a statement. as a statement of the goodness of God in our lives. I stood there in 1998 and I heard that story. I guess this is where it really began. I looked at that and I said, Father, and this is the night before the event at the congregation, I said, Father, if you'll allow me, wherever you will allow me to go, I'd like to tell that story. So today, in Franklin, Tennessee, I have to think because I live in Franklin, North Carolina. In Franklin, Tennessee, I've fulfilled 2 promises I made to the Almighty in 1998. Guys, I'm going to need that song. I made a promise that I would teach the story of the tree. I made a promise that I would, wherever I could, teach people about the 4 responsibilities that we have to Israel and the Jewish people. I tell the story of the tree for maybe another reason, though, is because in the 23 years since making that, not yet, guys, if you pause it there just a second. In the 23 years since making that promise, it hadn't been the easiest walk. You take a stand for Israel. You take a stand for the Jewish people. Expect opposition. Expect to be betrayed. I wouldn't trade it for anything. But there's been many times in 23 years that I've had to think about that tree. And that the Father has made a covenant, eternal covenant. And he broke branches off. He broke branches off. In the days that I taught replacement theology, I trampled on those branches. Thank God for his grace. Because now I'm watching the whole tree come back together. The 2 sticks.